Well, that was a laugh riot, wasn't it? I'm going to talk about the clip in just a second, but before I do, I want to publicly thank Ryan for, one, having you all invite me here, but it really came directly from Ryan, and two, for reading the passage from the book that he read earlier, which is great, because whenever you have the opportunity to relive one of the most painful and scarring moments of your life, do it in a room full of strangers. That's what I say. And I'll be rocking in the corner if you need me later. It's pretty awful. One thing that I didn't plan on talking about, but it happened because it happened this morning before we got here. Ryan says, "Hey, I want to read this passage." He says, and here's the thing. He says, he says, "You told me you wrote this book," and I wrote the book. Most books are written, but mine's definitely written at a 7th grade level. Okay, it's an easy read. And he goes, and I picked the one section with a word in it that I don't know what it means. Now, Ryan and I both, to be a Methodist pastor, you have to have a master's degree. We have a master's of divinity. It's required to be a United Methodist pastor. So Ryan's a smart guy, and he told me the word. And I explained it, and he says, well, you should take a poll, because I don't know if everybody will know what that means. So here's the word. Raise your hand if you know what this word means. Vaudeville. More than 5 or 6, Ryan. There were more than 5 or 6. Okay? Very quickly, I will point out 34. 52, okay? I just thought that was right, out of all the words, vaudeville. So that's quite a clip, right? I mean, how many folks had ever seen that before? It's got one of the most hits on YouTube of any film clip. It's called the three most honest minutes in television. And don't get excited, don't get all riled up. It's not going to be a political sermon, although you watch that and you can feel it, right? I mean, just in the middle of it, you can almost feel yourself tensing up. And part of the reason you can feel yourself tensing up is because you're really used to that feeling. Because we are a country that seems to constantly be tensing up these days. And so I love that clip, and I've watched that clip a lot. And I'm always leery showing anything that's that heavy because of both my past and because of reputation. And I'm sure there's people that might have heard that I was coming, and they're like, oh, good, funny Jerry's going to be here. Oh, that's fun Jerry's going to be here. That's great. And then they're like, oh, that's not fun or funny. I don't like any of that. Where's funny Jerry? He's not up there now. I want funny Jerry. So what's interesting about that clip is I've never laughed watching that clip, but I've cried watching that clip, more than once, actually. And not because of the America slant, not because of the patriotism. It's not that. For me, it's just a really easy clip to exchange everything that he's saying about America and subbing out the church and exchanging it for the church. It's a hard job to do what we do up here in this space, and sometimes it means we have to talk about hard stuff. And that's a hard clip to watch. Just last week, I'm sure some of you were here, and Ryan stood up here and talked about guns, and talked about our GLBT friends, and talked about our Muslim brothers and sisters. And that's hard stuff. And I'll be honest, I wasn't here for it, but I watched it online, and I got done watching it. I was like, I need a nap. I mean, it was exhausting for anyone that was here. It was a heavy sermon, and it was intense. And you know what else? I liked it. Because sometimes that's required. Heck, I watched it and went, geez, that could be 3 sermons. That could be 3 different sermons. You could do a sermon on each one of those. The problem was, you couldn't do it last week on 3 separate sermons. You had to put them all in one because Orlando was all in one. And so you couldn't wait to give it some other day. He had to give it then. And so that's what makes being a Christian hard. is being able to come together in a space like this and sometimes hear hard stuff. And one of the things that, and I sat there and thought, all right, so I watched that, and then this week I'm going to talk about the church not being what it was. Well, luckily, maybe it'll be happier next week. What's the film clip next week, Ryan? Hotel Rwanda. Okay, good. No, that's great. Because nothing's a knee slapper like genocide, let me tell you. That's, but it's going to be uplifting, right, is what you told me? It's going to be uplifting. Mark your clocks. Okay, we'll see. The sad thing about that clip isn't really about him talking about what's not. He's talking about what was and what was lost. And I think that's the pain for a lot of us in the church, is the idea of what once was and what has since been lost. And some of those things, to be completely honest, some of those things I'm okay with us losing. I mean, we have changed as a country and our understanding of God and our understanding of faith. Some things we don't need to get back. I can't imagine what John Wesley would think of me doing church in a bar. Probably not good. Now, having said that, his brother Charles apparently stole bar songs and turned them into hymns, so I'm not letting the Wesleys off the hook completely. But I still think there are parts of the past that we need to get back. There are parts that we need to come forward. And if we don't have those parts, bad things can happen. I'll tell you a quote that I had heard in seminary, and it took me forever to find it again. But it's a quote from John Wesley. He says this: "I'm not afraid that the people called Methodists should ever cease to exist either in Europe or America. But I am afraid lest they should only exist as a dead sect, having the form of religion without the power. And this undoubtedly will be the case unless they hold fast both the doctrine, spirit, and the discipline which they first set out for." We aren't what we used to be. Jeff Daniels said it in the clip. We used to sacrifice, cared for our neighbor, and passed laws against poverty, not poor people. And it's true. We don't sacrifice as much for our faith. There are pockets, sure, but we don't do it as much. We don't care about our neighbors as much as we used to. I don't even know the names of all the people that live on my street in Highlands Ranch. And poverty? We have criminalized the poor in this country, make no doubt. We have made it a crime to be poor. And Jesus wept. Now, religion always gets tagged for the bad things. Religion always gets tagged, and God gets tagged for wars and for atrocities that have happened. And there's no question people have done some awful things. Here's the hook: in the name of their God and religion. I don't believe it is God and religion, but it's in the name of. It's a misconstruction. Now, here's the good piece, though. Do you know we've built hospitals? And we've built universities, and we have changed this world for the better, over and over and over again. But I think something happened along the way. And I think that happened that along the way was as we got bigger and bigger, we became a machine. And we stopped being a movement. And when you stop being a movement, more often than not, you tend to edge God out. And as a result, sometimes it can feel like the Holy Spirit isn't even there. In between the committee meetings and the structures and the classes and the this and the that, we sometimes find ourselves going, where's God in all this? There's a passage in Isaiah that directly addresses the fear of making the change from the old to the new. That talks about how painful it actually is to feel that change. Someone said one time that nothing in nature changes without intense friction. He said a seed coming through the soil, a baby chick coming out of an eggshell, the birth of a human being. There's going to be pain, but that's okay because we can embrace the new things. This is a quote from Isaiah chapter 43. For people that geek out on such things, it's verses 18 and 19. Here's what it says. Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I'm doing a new thing. What I love is in the Bible, it actually, if it says new thing, it has an exclamation mark. See, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. God is doing a new thing. God will continue to do a new thing. You're having a new thing, right? Some of you can feel it. There's a new thing happening here at St. Luke's. You've got new leaders. You got new processes. And it's scary. And let's be very clear. The leaders you have today are standing on the shoulders of Janet Forbes. Janet did amazing things with this church. And now these leaders are going to stand on her shoulders and build even greater and more amazing things. But it's going to be scary. Because new is almost always scary. Now, I've got some super great news, though, in the process. And here's the thing. No matter what happens at St. Luke's, and there's going to be times when it's going to feel a little hairy. If you really follow as a United Methodist, Ryan and I, some others, we were at annual conference this year. A lot of rules and things get set up there. It felt pretty hairy. Every 4 years for the United Methodist Church, we have a general conference where we actually can change the rules of the church. That was really hairy. Not in a good way. Lots of machinery. But here's the best part. Regardless of what happens with the United Methodist Church, or religion in general, or St. Luke's, God's going to be just fine. Don't sweat that. I can't fathom God being up there, wringing God's hand, going, I wonder what I'm going to do. Oh my gosh, what if they dissolve my position? What if they downsize? God's going to be just fine. And keep that in your heart and soul as sort of an anchor to hold on to when things feel like they're starting to wobble a little bit. I'm going to tell you a couple stories, one of which is how this church is already changing the landscape of what church means to be. And it all started 5 or 6 years ago. Ryan and I went out to lunch. Ryan wasn't even here yet. Ryan was actually the director of the Wesley Foundation downtown with DU. And I was telling him about what we were doing in the park, and Ryan said, I bet I could get the students to do that. I bet I could get the students to do that for sure. And so the students started coming down doing that. Almost exactly at the same time, Brad Lorvik had a conversation with me about doing the very same thing here at St. Luke's. And then Ryan ends up coming here. And now on Mondays, for years, you heard Marilyn talk about it a little bit. You heard Trudy talk about it. First service, you heard Sam talk about it. There are people that come down to this park that we have in our downtown area, right in front of the Capitol, and they feed the poorest people in our city. And they love on them. And they don't judge them. And they give them food, and they give them drink, exactly like Jesus told us to. People forget this all the time. You know, the Bible's a big book. You've heard me say that before. The Bible's a big book. There's only one spot in the whole Bible where Jesus says, well, do you want the answers to the test? I can give them to you if you want them. You're like, awesome, yes, what, yeah. He goes, you want to know the final judgment, what it's going to be? Because it's not that complicated. Go on. They're ready. He goes, when I was hungry, you fed me. And when I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was naked, you gave me clothes. And when I was in prison, you came and you visited me. And the people that come down to the park, they know the people in the park. They know them by name. They know them personally. And remember what Jesus said. As you do unto them, you do unto me. And so what that means is the people that come down to the park every week, when they know them, they know Jesus. Personally. By name. And that's what we're shooting for. We're trying to find these personal relationships that we can have. I asked Sam, I go, can you give me a laundry list? Can you just write down really quick some of the names of everybody? Because there's so many people. And she was like, yeah, Sam and Chris and Dylan and Trudy and Mary and Marilyn and Linda and Liz and Jan and Kim. And she's running out of room. And more and more and more. We're changing the way church is done. And here's the best part. And here's the kicker. It's not done here. We will never change the church in this room. It will never happen. It has to happen out there. It absolutely has to happen out there. And if you're really lucky and you do get out there and you do this work, every so often, God will throw you a bone. And he'll show you someone or tell you a story and let you see what the difference is being made. So I got this opportunity. I was very lucky. I'm just going to tell you about this one buddy of mine, and then I'll move on. I saw him for the first time about 2 weeks ago. His name is Kevin, and he came down the park. There he is, right there, as a matter of fact. That was just taken like 2 weeks ago. And Kevin came down to the park, and I was overjoyed to see him because I hadn't seen him in probably well over a year. And that happens sometimes in the work that we do when we're down the park with our friends who don't have homes. And that is the case that sometimes it's great. They reconcile with their families. Sometimes they get jobs. Sometimes they move on to another city. And sometimes they get thrown in jail, in prison, and die. That's the reality. And so you could have somebody in line every single day like we did with Kevin and then gone. And you don't see him. And I don't know where he pops up. So I said, what's the story? You got to tell me what's happened. He goes, that's what he kept saying over and over again. He must have said 5, 6 times. God's been so good. God's been so good. He was in one of the lines at one of the soup kitchens downtown that wasn't ours. And a woman that worked at a church that he grew up in, that he used to go to, was working in the line downtown. And that's crucial because she took what she heard here and went out there. So that's the first step. And she's serving food, and she looks at him and she's like, Kevin. He's like, oh, hey, hi. She's like, oh my gosh, we've been worried sick. You got to come back to the church. Church actually is in Littleton, actually. You got to come back to the church. She goes, how come we don't see you? And he goes, actually 2 reasons. One, I'm in a shelter, and I have no way of getting from downtown to Littleton. He goes, and 2, I'm embarrassed. He goes, I'm embarrassed. And so this woman took that information and said, well, we're going to fix that. And so from that moment forward, she would drive downtown every Sunday morning and pick Kevin up at the shelter, drive back to Littleton, let him have church and family and community, and then would drive him back to the shelter. Every Sunday, she did this. And Kevin started asking if he could come a little bit earlier, especially in the winter. He goes, because I can help shovel. I can help shovel the walk. She said, yeah, I can totally do that. So he started showing up earlier and earlier, and then he started staying later and later because they needed help cleaning up. So he kept making this trek all the time, getting there earlier and staying later, until eventually Kevin became indispensable for the church. And eventually they offered him a job. And Kevin is now the caretaker and groundskeeper of that church and has got an apartment. He told me that on the 15th of this month, he celebrated 2 years of being off the street. And it all started because one person said, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do a new thing. I'm going to take what I hear here, and I'm going to live it out there. Augustine has this great quote. He says this. He was talking about worship and talking about action and how we make actions happen. Augustine said, without us, God will not. And without God, we cannot. Because what we are shooting for is two things. Ryan and I, of course, and Sally and Jessica and everybody else. Incidentally, by the way, let me throw this in. Jessica is no stranger to the park either. Your new pastor that's going to be starting July 1st, Jessica's been coming to the park with us for years with her old church. This is not her first rodeo with the poor. She gets it. But when we stand up here, like everybody else, there's a part of us that wants to be liked. Who doesn't like clapping or laughter and all those things? But unlike performance, of which I know a little bit about, what makes this gig different is that's not what we're shooting for. We only have one job to do here. Only one, and it's every pastor in every church across the country and around the world, and the one job is this, is to make disciples for Jesus. That's it. Anything else is extra. And the way that we do that is try to convince folks to go out and be Christ in the world. Because if we can do that, then we've got something even more important to do. And the one more important thing that we have to do is this: build the kingdom of God. And not only do I know you know it, I heard you say it. You said it just about 20 minutes ago. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. On earth as it is in heaven. It is not about sticking around until we're in the ground that we get there. It is our job and our prayer that we say every week to bring heaven down here, is to create paradise here on earth. And it's not just for us, it's paradise for everybody. Martin Luther King said this: it is not possible to be in favor of justice for some people and not be in favor of justice for everyone. It has to include everyone. There's no such thing as the social gospel. That doesn't exist. There's just the gospel. Jesus wanted justice for all. And if we don't get that, then we haven't been listening close enough. Because that's the message of Christ. And when we do that, we will bring paradise here down on earth. And it won't just be paradise for you and me. It'll be paradise for all. The first way that you know you have a problem is to recognize it's there. The church is not what it used to be. But it can be. And when it is, we'll have paradise. Thank you so much. God bless you. Amen.